After the two disastrous opening rounds for the Mercedes team in the 2024 F1 season, they are now planning for Melbourne in 2 weeks' time to run experiments with their W15 car. This comes from their F1 trackside engineer director Andrew Shovelin, who says the team will be running these experiments throughout the opening practice sessions of the weekend in an attempt to solve the issues with the W15. Across the opening 2 rounds, and more specifically at the Saudi Arabian Jeddah Corniche circuit, the W15 had been plagued by bouncing, especially with low fuel in qualifying. While its weaknesses, which were seen in the high-speed corners relative to rivals, was very apparent throughout the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix weekend as well. Shovelin suggests that the team will be trying a couple of different approaches at the upcoming GP as it continues to hone the car. There's definitely data we're picking through from Jeddah, he said. We're also looking at data from the Bahrain race and of course the test. And we will come up with a plan for how we approach free practice in Melbourne. But it's not just based on what we did in Jeddah. Now, this is the thing. All teams suffer some form of bouncing, but when it comes to Mercedes and all their ground effect area cars, no matter the W13, 14 or 15, they have always suffered the most, and in a dramatic fashion as well. And it brought itself back to the forefront of the show last time out in Jeddah, with the car bouncing like a yo-yo. Basically is how Lewis and Russell described it throughout free practice, and of course that's when the team were running the car as low to the ground as they could, and it's why they were fastest in some of these practice sessions across the opening 2 weekends. But of course with this bouncing comes the need to increase the rear ride height, and as such this will then of course lose performance quite naturally. And then on top of all of that, last time out in Jeddah, with the W15 having one of the highest levels of drag inherently within their design of the W15, they went with an extreme version of a skinny rear wing which they ran throughout the qualifying and race from Friday onwards. And this of course meant they weren't at threat from any of the teams through DRS, which was seen when Oscar Piastri was attacking with it throughout the race. But what this did mean is that it meant they were losing over half a second to Verstappen and 4/10 to the other big 4 teams in qualifying. And this particular issue widened in the race when it came to Hamilton's attack on Lando Norris once they'd both pitted for soft tyres, and the gap went to over a second, which you can actually see from this video up on the screen right now. And this is where all these problems come, because this bouncing is making them raise the ride height, and as such you're losing the natural performance that is housed within the car. But before we go any further, if you've enjoyed the content within this video, please consider subscribing, as I would greatly appreciate it, as I'm looking to grow this channel and I have a lot more content that I want to produce. And I may even be going to the Japanese Grand Prix later on in April, so I could have some really interesting content to bring you all. Right, back to the video. And this is something the team are trying to get on top of within the aerodynamic department as well as the vehicle dynamics department, as Andrew Shovelin continued to explain. And he goes on to state that we're doing some experiments there that will hopefully give us a direction that's good for performance. So it seems it's always a trade-off in Formula 1. If you're doing one thing, it's going to negatively affect something else, and vice versa. And Shovelin went on to confirm that high-speed corner performance is one of the key issues that the team is looking at with an eye on Australia. He suggests that the weakness that proved costly in Bahrain was due to a combination of factors, with one of them being that the balance wasn't great from the start. So those fast corners, the walls aren't particularly far away, so the ones where the driver wants a lot of confidence, and quite often we were snapping to oversteer if they really leant on the tyres. And you can easily imagine how unsettling this is for the drivers. Now, that was a factor in race and in qualifying. In qualifying, we were also suffering a bit with the bouncing. That was less of a problem in the race. There's more fuel in the car, you're going a bit slower, And of course, naturally, this seemed to calm this particular issue down and wasn't a major one. And then the big one is we don't really have enough grip there. So that's one of the things that we're working hard on this week, because Melbourne has similar characteristics in its array of corners. So we're doing lots of work to try and understand why did we not seem to have the grip of some of our close competitors. Interestingly, Shovelin also noted that Hamilton and Russell took different setups over the course of the Jeddah weekend. Some of that was that they'd complained about bouncing, so we were looking at ways to try and improve that. You can play with ride heights, you can play with stiffness, and all that seems effective. And also that we were just trying to tune the balance through the speed range. So what's the car like in low speed? What's it like in high speed? And although the cars later converged throughout the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix weekend, Shovelin says that useful lessons were learned. So again, Mercedes are going into another weekend not knowing how their car is going to perform. And they're going to be running experiments, which is something you really wanted to have ironed out by the time you got to the first race, let alone race weekend 3 as it is now. And I think all of these issues are just going to put them on the back foot in terms of understanding the car, setting it up correctly, and then the development path you have to take. How are they going to know which direction to take development if they can't get a hold on this bouncing? Because of course you're having to run the car at different ride heights. So all these performance parts that you bring to the car, they're all in conjunction with everything. It's to do with the ride height, it's to do with the suspension geometry, all of these sorts of things. And of course the downforce and how the floor interacts and generates that downforce. And if you're having to constantly raise the ride height, lower the ride height, the level of downforce that you're generating is just going to be so vastly different from one race weekend to the next. And this is just not that stable platform you want to be able to develop from. It leaves you having to go and look in many different directions, whereas say like teams such as McLaren, Aston Martin, Ferrari, they've sorted all these issues out. And these are really huge fundamental issues for a Formula 1 car in this ground effect era, and they can just focus purely on performance. And this is something Ferrari, as I just mentioned, have got a hold on, but last year with their SF23 held them back dramatically, which is why you saw the kind of plateau in terms of development and getting closer to Red Bull in terms of race pace, although you could say by the time of the end of the season they had. But that was of course because Red Bull had long ago stopped developing their car, all the way from the midway point of the season. So there's a little bit of outside, not interference, but that's what I'll call it, interference in terms of why that was the case for Ferrari. And this is just something Mercedes have to get on top of when it comes to the next 3 or 4 races. I think that's the pivotal time period in which they have to get on top of all of this so they can start to bring performance to the car. Right everyone, thank you all for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, leave a like, comment down below, and I will catch you all in another F1 video soon.